All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well today. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show about an hour earlier than its usual time, 12 p.m. Have real life stuff I have to do first, later today at least. On this show, we look at last night's slate, see what went well, what might not have gone as well, and then we also, just kind of talk through the slate, brainstorm, talk through injuries, guys that stand out a little bit. And then on the pre-lock show, which is at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, we talk through leverage plays, core plays, guys I'm going under on, and all the fun stuff. So definitely good times to be had. The pre-lock show is only for VIP members, so feel free to click the link in the description if you want to become a VIP member to have access to the domination station, all the really good coaches we have, and all the other sports we do as well. The promo code BOB gives you a 10% discount. I think that's everything. All right, let's look at last night. Was an interesting slate for sure. Was a positive one for me, but I know it wasn't for everyone, so I'm not gonna celebrate too much. Cam Thomas was a core play. Brandon Ingram was a core play. Those two made sense. Michael Porter Jr. was a guy that I mentioned on the pre-lock show that if Jamal Murray or Jokic ended up being out, that he was definitely someone that I wanted to have plenty of exposure to, so I was well over the field on him. Jaren Jackson Jr. was a core play. Was well over that 17% number. Giannis Valanciunas, we talked about on the pre-lock show. I had plenty of exposure to him. Ayo Dosunmu was someone that we talked about on the pre-lock show. Not really someone that I emphasized a ton. Someone asked a question about Ayo, and we talked about if DeMar DeRozan someone wanted to play him just by himself, and I was okay with that. But I preferred playing him if DeMar DeRozan was out. We got that news after the show, but once we got that, I was totally fine with having exposure to him. LeBron James was a total FOMO play that I'm glad I did not miss out on. We were slightly over the field on him, around 25%. And we had some exposure to Jalen Williams as well, just naturally, thanks to the domination station. That wasn't something we had to force, just naturally had somewhere between 2 and 5% exposure to him, which was plenty. So really, there weren't any major surprises. I think you had to probably make sure that you didn't miss the DeMar DeRozan news and you played a little bit of AO. And then once we saw the news that Jamal Murray was going to be out, you had to make sure you had some exposure to Michael Porter Jr. I think cores were pretty solid. Leverage plays panned out, I think. I had a solid slate across the board. So not going to harp too much on that. Not going to celebrate too much because I know it wasn't like a super great night for everyone. So we'll move on. Starting off with this first game, this is a weird slate, I'll say. Nothing really stands out too much. I'm not super excited about the slate in general. I'm hoping we get a little bit more news to hopefully spice things up a little bit, but we take what we can get when it comes to DFS. The first game on the slate has a gigantic spread of 13 points. We have the Pistons against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Pistons, we have Marvin Bagley listed as out. Cade Cunningham's currently listed as being out. Ricky Rubio was not on the injury report, so it looks like he's healthy, and Dylan Windler is out as well for the Cavs. For me, no one's really standing out too much, again, as someone that I'm super excited about. The spread does worry me a little bit. Ownership, as long as these numbers stay where they are, feels pretty appropriate. So really not loving any of these spots. If I had gun to head, I would be open to taking a shot on Garland, but I wish he was a little bit more cheap. Mobley, Allen, if they were lower owned, I'll be more interested in them. They're definitely viable plays. I'm not trying to avoid this game. If the domination station gives me some exposure naturally, I'm fine with it, but just not my favorite game for sure. So I think it's okay to just move on. One to two off pieces for me. Not a game that I'm trying to force a lot of exposure to. Bobby, early today, way too early, but busy day. So I want to try to get this show in while I can. Pre-lock show will be back to its usual time at 5:30, but this one I had to fit in where I could. Next up, we have the Hornets against the Wizards. Both of these teams are teams I like to pick on a good bit, so it's going to be interesting just kind of seeing where I'm going to fall. I do know I have at least a few leverage plays that I want to have from this game. Already just kind of looking at ownership as long as it stays where it's at. From an injury news standpoint, the Hornets, they have Cody Martin and Kelly Oubre out. None of that really matters too much for me. The Wizards have Bradley Beal listed as questionable and Kyle Kuzma listed as questionable, along with Daniel Gafford currently listed as out. Ooh, one thing I forgot to talk about. We are getting super close to the trade deadline. That is tomorrow. So we might see some pieces move. So if we get like the trade news, that could really spice up this slate. But it also does increase the risk. Those of you who have been playing DFS for a while, sometimes you can get burnt by a guy getting traded late or a guy not playing late post lock. It can get a little messy. There can be some DNPs. So some people play light around this time period. For me personally, I'll be playing a 20 max today, and I'll be playing in like a small field GPP. I kind of go back and forth between 150 and 20 max. Today's just a 20 max day for me, so there's that. I like Bradley Beal, but him being questionable scares me a little bit. Hopefully we get the news on if he's playing or not pretty early. If him and or Kuzma are out, I plan on playing the other for sure. Porzingis is going to be leverage play for me without a doubt. I'm not really questioning that too much. I'll probably have like 10% of him. Mason Plumlee, I plan on being around field weight exposure on 6,600, 16% ownership. I plan on letting the domination station decide my fate on him, but I do plan on having some exposure. Of course, if Kuzma and or Beal are out, that makes the other Wizard options much more viable. It really just depends on which one or if both end up being out. So there's a lot of different variations at play when it comes to the Wizards tonight. So we just have to keep an eye on the news per usual. Could make for some very fun, cheap plays for sure. Let's see. Am I missing anyone? We talked about Plumlee. Rozier's is definitely someone that's on my radar. LaMelo, I plan on having exposure to. I'm not really trying to fade him, but he's not like one of my favorite plays on the slate. He's just a viable high-end point guard. I think it's safe to move on. But Beal is probably the guy who I'm highlighting the most, along with Porzingis. As long as Beal is playing, he's going to be a leverage play for me tonight, and Porzingis is definitely going to be a leverage play for me tonight. Reasoning, I play bigs against the Hornets, and then the sim model likes Bradley Beal a lot. It usually does. It works out sometimes it doesn't. That's just a shot I am always willing to take. Next up, we have the Sixers against the Celtics. Now, from a news standpoint, Joel Embiid is currently listed as questionable. That is important. As we know. If Joel Embiid is out, then that increases the usage rates for guys like James Harden, Maxey, Harris, Melton. They all become much more viable. Whereas if Embiid is healthy, I'm not super interested in this team. The Celtics are a solid defensive unit, and so not one I like to pick on too much. If Joel Embiid ends up playing, I'm open to having some exposure. Really just a spot I need to dig into a little bit more, to be honest with you guys, before I kind of say he's going to be a leverage play. Center is a very valuable position, so I try to not get too loosey-goosey with that position. Next up for the Celtics, we have Jaylen Brown listed as probable with illness. Robert Williams is probable. Luke Cornett is probable. Marcus Smart is still out. Gallinari is still out, so no major surprises there. With Brown returning, I'm not really planning on having a ton of exposure to these guys either. I don't like to pick on the Sixers too much. I am always willing to consider taking a shot on Tatum or Brown when they're lower owned, which they tend to be. But again, another spot I'm just going to need to dig a little bit deeper into before I kind of set it in stone, because it's not one of those spots that I typically like to pick on. So TBD, we'll know by the pre-lock show. But in general, not a game I plan on having a ton of exposure to unless we get some solid injury news. All right, next up, we have the Indiana Pacers against the Miami Heat. The Pacers only have Chris Duarte listed as questionable, so nothing too crazy there. The Miami Heat have a laundry list. They have Victor Oladipo listed as out. Gabe Vincent is listed as probable. Orlando Robinson is listed as probable. Kyle Lowry is still out. Duncan Robinson is still out. And then The rest of it doesn't really matter too much. The Miami Heat do have a few guys that are interesting here. When Victor Oladipo and Kyle Lowry are out, the guys with the highest usage rate on this team, with Gabe Vincent returning, more than likely probably going to be in the starting lineup again. The guys who lead the usage rate, no surprises here, are Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. I do like attacking this Pacers team, especially in the front court. So I'm more open to playing Bam and Jimmy Butler than I typically am. It looks like they're all picking up decent ownership because they're not sky high in a solid matchup where they have some guys out on their team that have high usage rates. So I plan on probably at least being close to field weight on Butler, Hero, Bam. I'm not trying to fade it. I like these spots for these guys. Bam, as long as he stays close to that 10% projected ownership range, I could see him potentially being a leverage play. Again, I have to be careful with these center plays, but he's definitely someone who's on my radar that I'll be totally fine being over the field on. Miles Turner, that's my guy. I love playing him, but not in this matchup against the Heat. Similar story for Halliburton and the others as well. I don't hate taking a shot on guys like Buddy Hield or Mathurin even, just because you can shoot threes on the Miami Heat if someone gets hot. But again, that's just really if and whatever. It is not very likely. It's just a chance. So those are the kind of plays I'm willing to take a shot on at times. Let's see what the sim model thinks about Buddy Hield. I think it likes Mathurin, if I'm remembering correctly. Okay, it has some interest in Buddy Hield's upside. And then let's look at Mathurin. Yeah, it likes Mathurin a little bit too. So those are just two guys that are definitely going to be on my radar tonight. Not really trying to force the exposure to them yet, just because we need to wait and see how news breaks out. If there's other guys I like more at those positions. When I'm playing 20 lines, I have less leverage plays than I typically do when I'm 150 maxing. So my leverage plays just mean a lot more to me when I'm only running 20 lines. But these are just guys that are on my radar, and I like to at least call those kind of plays out. Even if I'm not playing them, at least you guys are aware of some of their upside. And then a lot of these cheap guys down here are projecting well. I'm sure Gabe Vincent will probably be the super chalk on this slate unless we get better value. With, like we talked about, Lowry and Oladipo being out, Gabe Vincent should see plenty of minutes. What he does with those minutes is always the concern. He's a low usage guy. He can totally go out there and do almost nothing and just do cardio for the entire game. We've seen him do that. But he also has shown and had performances where he has like 30, 40 kind of point upside in spots like this as well. So we really just need him to see somewhere between 25 and 30 points. So I'm totally fine playing him and having exposure to him at 4,300. But I do recognize that there is risk involved there. So yeah, I'm totally fine with the value from this game. I would love to get better value, but I understand that value, so I'm not trying to fade it. All right, next up we have the San Antonio Spurs against the Toronto Raptors. For the Spurs, they have Keldon Johnson listed as questionable. Trey Jones is listed as questionable. Sachan is doubtful. Romeo Langford is out. Dwayne Dedmon is out. Recent trade, main reason for that. Be interesting to see how if Dedmon does impact their front court defense, just because they've been an awful defense everywhere all year. But anyway, he's not playing right now. And then Vassell is out. They're missing a lot of guys. And so, per usual, we'll probably end up having a lot of Spurs exposure, especially if Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones miss this game. I'm going to be playing guys whose name I don't know and probably aren't even in the domination station yet. Josh Richardson would definitely be one of the main contributors. We've seen what Malachi Branham can do, and Keita Bates-Diop will probably be the three that I feel the most comfortable with outside of the obvious, like Jakob Poeltl. But don't love the matchup for Poeltl against the Raptors, but still viable because he should see an increase in usage if Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones are out. So something to keep in your mind for later. And then the guys I feel a bit better about if Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones miss are Richardson, Branham, Keita Bates-Diop, and I'm sure there'll be some more guys that kind of get added if those guys end up being out that I'll have to consider on a slate like this. Zolo, good to see you. Good to see you. Next up, we have the Kings against the Rockets. The Kings are pretty healthy. Kessler Edwards, TBD, if he's going to play or not tonight with the trade. The Houston Rockets have Garrison Matthews listed as questionable. Kevin Porter Jr.'s out. The matchup is really just what makes this one interesting. If the ownership stays low, I'll have plenty of exposure to the typical guys like Sabonis, Fox are definitely already on my radar, especially if that ownership stays super low. I understand the concern here is probably blowout and price tag, but when we have guys with nice upside and soft matchups and they're low owned, I always attack that. It doesn't mean they'll come through, but I always love that kind of upside. So I'll have exposure to them as long as the ownership stays low. Shungin's also in a fantastic spot here against the Kings. I like the spot for him, especially if he's going to continue to be low owned. I don't hate that. Outside of those pieces, it's like Jalen Green starting to pop a little bit, which is fine. I know he didn't play too many minutes last time around, but I would assume that was probably more so due to the blowout. No one else is really standing out for me too much, but I will dig a little bit deeper into some of these pieces in the sim model just because these are kind of teams where they have streaky shooters and they can kind of get hot. In particular, I want to look at Eric Gordon, 5,400. Yeah. Malik Monk's. Like, we see Malik Monk with a 2.5% chance of hitting 8x in comparison to everyone else in his price range. Like, that's interesting to me. Daniel Gafford's popping a little bit. Interesting. But yeah, for sure, I like Eric Gordon a little bit as I'm thinking about some potential one-offs here. Malik Monk, not my favorite kind of play, but I'm okay with having a little bit of exposure. But for the most part, my main leverage plays here, if ownership stays where they are, would be like Sabonis, Fox, and Shingen. Moving on, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves against the Utah Jazz. Timberwolves played last night. Anthony Edwards leverage play. I don't think it did not go very well. I don't believe. Kyle Anderson didn't play last night. It's probably safe to assume that was due to the back-to-back that they're on. So he's currently listed as TBD. Rivers is still out. McLaughlin, TBD still. Cat still out. I know Naz Reid started, and that really got a lot of people hyped up. Honestly, I didn't really jump on the train. I don't think I was super great at predicting the future or anything like that. It's just when Rudy Gobert's playing, I don't really care to play Naz Reid very often, but that definitely could have panned out well. And Torrin Prince ended up starting the second half. I did have a little bit of exposure to him, but I didn't really keep up with how he did last night. For the Jazz, Jared Vanderbilt is currently listed as questionable. So that's something I want to watch out for. The sim model always loves Jared Vanderbilt, so I usually at least have some sort of min projection or min exposure on him just to be slightly over the field and have some exposure. Even in a 20 max, I'm okay with him being in one line. That's probably about it. That's what a 5% min would be. And then outside of that, it looks like Gobert, Kelly O are projecting well. If they show up in my lines naturally, as of right now, I'm not going to try to limit it. Lauri Markkanen always has interesting upside. Anthony Edwards is interesting. Played him last night. Like I said, that didn't really pan out. Sim Auto doesn't like him. Probably a safe fade for me today then. Markkanen? No. Yeah. Where's Markkanen? Markkanen's here. Yeah. So even though they're low owned, not really spots I'm trying to force as of right now. But it looks like we'll have some exposure if projections stay the way they are, but things can definitely change as the slate goes on. But no one that's really standing out for me so much that I'm just so excited to play. Next up, we have the Dallas Mavericks against the Clippers. Kyrie Irving should be playing his first game today for the Mavericks with Luka Doncic out. I'm not going to lie to you guys. You guys know I'm a narrative guy. If Kyrie was facing almost anyone outside of the Clippers, I would be more open to just having some exposure to him just for giggles. But the matchup against the Clippers is one that I don't like to pick against very often. If I can find a reason to play him, I'm okay with having some exposure, but not a spot that I love too much right now. It's weird. The Mavericks play at a faster pace when Luka Doncic is out. So typically, that's not always set in stone, but typically they do. And who knows how they'll run with Kyrie playing with the team now. But so that makes the matchup slightly softer just in general than it appears to be on paper. And so that's why I have some interest in Kawhi and Paul George tonight, but really just a spot I want to dig a little deeper into. I really am interested in taking a shot on one of these role players like Tim Hardaway Jr. in particular is the one that's really standing out for me a little bit, mostly because he's been in bad form. I think he was probably a leverage play for me last time they were out, and that didn't pan out very well. But I want to see how this team operates with Kyrie and if he gets better shots, more openings, things of that sort. I don't know. It's kind of some speculation here, but with Dinwiddie and DFS going as well, just interested in seeing how this team operates. And I think there's going to be some upside from one of these guys. It's just you need to dig a bit deeper to figure out which one it's going to be. But as of right now, it's Tim Hardaway Jr. who's on my radar. I think you can consider Josh Green, Christian Wood as well. But Christian Wood's just a guy that I don't trust a ton, especially around the trade deadline. So I just don't want to have too much exposure to that situation. For the Clippers, Zubac always has upside, but he's extremely volatile. Not my favorite spot for him personally. It's really primarily just choosing between Kawhi or Paul George and which one I want to utilize as a leverage play tonight. Sim model doesn't like either one, I don't think. Either one. Oh, where's Kawhi? I don't see him. That's fine. 97. Oh, there he is. All right, Sim model likes Kawhi a little bit. So yeah, more than likely, Kawhi Leonard will be a leverage play for me, but I really have to make sure I feel comfortable about it. 5 cents, good to see you, man. 5 cents said, how funny both LA teams lost Kyrie bid. Yeah. I know the report came out that the Nets apparently did it on purpose for the Lakers. I'm sure they probably did it for the Clippers as well, just so he wouldn't be happy out there in LA, which I totally get and would totally do too. Last game on the slate, we have the Portland Trailblazers against the Golden State Warriors. Really a game that's interesting, and it looks like we'll have a decent amount of ownership. A lot of them project decently as well, so probably not a situation I'll have to force exposure to, but we'll see. The Warriors are missing Stephen Curry, and when Curry's out, everyone else's usage rates increase, and so that's why you're seeing more ownership on guys like Poole and Thompson. Personally, if Poole's going to be this popular, I'm okay with being around field weight when I'm 20 maxing. A lot more open, and I'm not as extreme as I tend to be sometimes. So I'm not trying to fade Poole. But if he's going to be 30-40% owned, I'm probably just going to try to match the field. That's not a situation where I want him to be a core play, at least as of right now. My opinion could change drastically by the time we get to the pre-lock show, but where I'm at right now, I'm kind of stubborn on the ownership. Damian Lillard at 16% against the Golden State Warriors makes a ton of sense, but probably can't make him a leverage play. Definitely at 10,700, just really hard to put 30% men on a guy like that, at least for me. Klay Thompson is semi-interesting if he is going to stay that low owned. Just need to see where ownership lies. Simons and the other guys on this team I'm less interested in, if I'm being honest. But I do kind of just want exposure to this game just because I like the game environment. Not the highest game total, but should be one of the closer games. Has the closest spread on the entire slate, and so I just like having exposure to these kind of game environments. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to attack it yet, but by the pre-lock show, we'll know exactly who our leverage plays will be from this game and how exposures are landing. So yeah, everyone, that's just kind of the slate walkthrough. We'll talk through core plays, leverage plays, things of that sort on the pre-lock show later today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for joining and watching. Please don't forget to like It helps out a ton. We're trying to grow here. So always appreciate the support and for everyone sticking around. Y'all have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.